2 weeks, Derek Togerson, 2 weeks removed from opening day. Excited about that. Much to discuss. Glad to have you back. How was the time away?
It was awesome. It was awesome to get just kind of reset for a little bit.
You guys got out of town?
Out of country, yeah.
Out of country, even better.
Yes, I had to go very far away to find peace.
Nice. Good for you. I'm glad you were able to enjoy a sliver of that for a little while, and nice to have you back to talk some Padres. Again, 2 weeks away from opening day. Some interesting stories popping up in the last week. Some fun developments to discuss as we get a little bit closer to the season, buttoning up this opening day roster and seeing what 2025 has in store for your San Diego Padres. Thanks to OGs, the sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Appreciate all that they do for us. If you want to watch, let's see, Major League Baseball in a couple weeks, go to OGs, one of their many San Diego County locations. Great menu that they're constantly updating, tons of specials, awesome beer list, and just a good place to hang out with your folks, have a good meal, watch some sports, hit up one of OG's locations around San Diego County. Again, thanks to the OG's team for all they do for us. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Friar podcast. He's Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp, joining you on a Thursday afternoon, probably about a half hour or so, try and get you out somewhere around tip time for the Aztecs Boise State and their Mountain West tournament opener, high stakes game, maybe a potential play-in game for those two programs on the bubble. But before that, we will talk some Padres, and glad to be doing that with you again, Derek, after a well-deserved vacation. Did you have a chance to get caught up on the happenings around the Padres? Were you able to kind of, I know it's hard when you're especially out of the country to really stay locked in.
I have no desire to do that. No, my phone was locked in a safe for 9 days.
You're smart. You make vacations like actual vacations. I admire that about you.
The last thing I want to do is know what's going on in the rest of the world. I completely cut off. It's amazing.
Got any thoughts? Got any questions? Anything we need to get you updated on about the state of the Padres now with 2 weeks out?
I did a little reading when I got back. Seems like not a whole lot had gone on. The biggest thing was Jose Iglesias signing on.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, between him and Gavin Sheets, it's starting to kind of feel to me like this year's version of Donovan Solano and David Peralta. A couple of dudes who are veteran guys, well known around the clubhouse, well known around the game, who come in and they outperform their career averages. It's kind of got that vibe to it right now, man. When I was in Peoria a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to watch Sheets in the batting cage, and the first thought was, boy, the ball's coming off his bat pretty good. Like that's a different guy than I saw the last couple of years with the White Sox. I wonder if he might be a dark horse roster candidate, and all of a sudden he might be slugging his way into the opening day DH job. So it's nice to see maybe another one of those AJ Preller kind of under the radar signings of a veteran guy who's got something to prove. Bring him in for almost nothing, and he pays huge dividends.
Yeah, no question about that. And our buddies John and Jim had me on the other day, and they, Jim kind of put me on the spot. He's like, all right, fill out the bench right now. Give me your guys. And I think Jose Iglesias was the one that slipped my mind in the moment. And it seems like if you bring in a guy like that, coming off a good year, established, seems to be a great clubhouse guy, appeared to kind of be like the Mets profar last year. Like he arrives, they get things in gear. The vibes are great. He's singing, he's doing his whole thing, and performed really well at the plate. Like, do you bring him in at this juncture of spring training, knowing what he's all about, if you don't fully intend on having him on the roster, unless he's just shows up and is a complete disaster for whatever reason, which obviously doesn't appear to be the case?
Well, I'll flip that over. Does he show up somewhere? I mean, he even said himself, like, I'm not a minor league player at this point in my career. So does he go somewhere where he's thinking, I got to fight my way onto a roster? Remember, he has a decision in where he signs as well. So I think he was talking to the Padres and talking to AJ and be like, listen, as long as you don't come over here and, tear your UCL or an ACL or forget which way and you hold the bat on, you're probably going to be on this opening day roster. So I think that's every indication says that he is going to be a really important bench piece for this club from the very start against the Braves.
Yeah, and so you start to kind of work it out in your mind, like, okay, there's going to be a catcher in the mix, and the catcher thing is interesting. Like we've seen a lot of Martin Maldonado, and so I think it's led people to think, okay, this might be a real thing, unless they're just giving him every look possible, feeling like they maybe know what they have in Elias Diaz and Luis Campusano. Campy not necessarily tearing the cover off the ball, neither is Maldonado, which I don't think you would expect him to, given what we've seen from him. So it's interesting there, like. Iglesias, catcher, is it Sheets? Is it Terso? There's four right there. Then like who's in the mix for maybe a final bench spot?
Well, Tyler Wade, is going to be there. He gives you way too much defensive flexibility. They love the guy. He's a great clubhouse dude. Hasn't hit a home run since 2022 in the major league level, but off Alek Manoah, by the way, of all things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's not a bad guy to get one from when he was with the Yankees. But he's going to be Eggy Rosario is going to be in the mix. What's interesting about this group of potential bench guys is it's really different. Connor Joe is the other one who's, of course, going to be there for sure. So, I mean, that's what 7 guys we just named who we think all can probably handle major league at bats. We know that, Aggie destroys left-handed pitching. Iglesias does the same thing. We know Sheets is showing us he can play a little bit of corner outfield. He can play a little bit of first base. We know Connor Joe can do a little bit of everything. I mean, he's going to be your emergency catcher. He caught his last year at University of San Diego. So and Mikey Schilt is already very aware of that. So Connor Joe's the third string catcher, a guy who, if you have an emergency or lose somebody to a pinch hitter or a pinch runner late in the game, he can go behind the plate for you. So that's like 7 dudes that we know they can come out and give you a good at bat or give you some solid defense in late inning, high leverage situations. So it's nice to have that kind of depth in the system. Now, we also know Ornelas, he has not made his major league debut. He'd be the easy one to leave down unless he continues to just rip the cover off the ball and forces his way into the lineup. But he's a guy who's one of those organizational depth dudes who somebody gets hurt, you'd really have no problem or fears bringing him up midseason. So the option thing is going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. But I like the depth of the bench and how much they might be able to pull off here.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, I think, there's probably been years in the past. I mean, especially when you look at like Nelson Cruz and Matt Carpenter and the collection that we saw in 2023, where it wasn't so much, do we have, it was a question of, do they have the talent? Now you feel like they have the talent. In previous years, it felt like, okay, are there enough functional baseball players to fill out a bench that can actually contribute? And that was part of the reason, that 2023 was such a struggle. And Melvin even talked about it. Like, you didn't necessarily have the feeling like there were guys, like a team is better when everybody's involved, when everybody, whether it's coming off the bench, whether it's having a platoon, like everybody is involved, everybody's contributing, like we saw last year. It looks like the pieces are there to have one of those types of benches where it's not a matter of can they fill it out. It's more so like there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of competition, and a lot of different versions of the lineup you could see with different guys in different spots, maybe based on situation, maybe based on lefty righty, to put together a pretty stout 1 through 9, which we saw last year. Like last year, there were points where it seemed like 7 through 9 was performing better than 1 through 3, and that's, you don't want your top guys underperforming, but you want that kind of like even distribution of contributions, which we saw last year.
Yeah, it's a really good approach thing, and credit to everybody on the staff for throwing that mentality into these guys. But you're right. I mean, you got a guy like a Jason Hayward who might be hitting 8th in your lineup with that kind of veteran presence who can work a walk, who knows how pitchers are going to attack him, and knows how to attack basically every pitcher in the National League at this point. He spent his entire career there, aside from a cup of coffee last year in Houston. That's a guy who, if that's your 8th hitter, you've got a lot of length in that lineup. So he's not going to go out there and hit you, 270 with 25 bombs like he used to early in his career, but I don't think he's going to be a complete liability. He'll be able to extend at bats, make pitchers work. He'll be able to maybe pass the baton to the next guy. I really do like, maybe not the dynamic 1 through 9 that a team like maybe the Braves or the Dodgers can throw at you, but I like the professionalism of the at bats you're going to get from everybody 1 through 9. And as you said, doesn't matter who they're throwing out there in a lineup any given day, ride the hot hand, go the lefty righty matchup. You're going to feel pretty good about everybody 1 through 9. And that's a nice spot to be in. Especially because, even, before you got here, man, I remember the days where it was like Paul McAnulty's hitting second. What Tommy Medica is on the, what is going on? Do we have any length in this lineup whatsoever? So this is still just it's very refreshing to see names you actually recognize 1 through 9 and a little bit deeper on the bench with this club.
Yeah. There's no question about it. Oh shoot, I had a thought that escaped me there towards the end.
Well, they get away from me all the time.
Talking about Gavin Sheets. Oh, what my thought was about the Dodgers, actually. So maybe it was a good thing that it escaped me briefly. But during that playoff series, like 7, 8, 9 was a grind. And part of it was the Ohtani factor, knowing that you wanted to get out of the way with nobody on before he comes to the plate. But that's an example of those professional at bats and how much they paid off in the postseason. It seems like they have the guys that can kind of provide that by the time they turn it over for Rise and Tatis down the line. For Sheets, I was looking up like some of his career numbers, splits, hitting better off lefties than righties this year, which obviously goes counter to what he has done through most of his career. Sneaky good in high leverage situations is Gavin Sheets throughout his big league career, not just talking about the spring. And also better as a DH than a position player. And I wonder if it's like, staying locked in on one thing, not worried about playing different positions, this and that, how that might be able to affect you. I don't know, something to keep an eye on if he locks in one of those spots. How often do you see him at first base? How often is he just kind of a DH that's going to give you some slug, some pop, or a bench guy based on situations late in games?
Yeah, fairly decent pinch hit numbers for him as well. And that's one of those interesting things. A lot of guys just, their performance doesn't degrade as the game goes on and gets tighter. Gavin Sheets seems to be like one of those dudes where everybody else starts to get a little more stressed. He just stays the same. And that's what makes it look like his performance is elevating. But you're right. He's got really good high leverage numbers throughout his career. And remember a couple of years ago, 2021, 22, he was really good with the White Sox. I mean, they won a division title. They were in the playoffs. Like they were a really good up and coming young team. And then it all kind of fell apart for him when everybody got hurt or didn't perform or, had to trade a couple pieces away and then became what they were last year. But I think he's one of those guys who simply change of scenery, playing competitive games again, because there were no competitive games in Chicago on the South Side the last 2 years. They just weren't. And if he's a guy who is a higher leverage kind of performer, playing in the National League West for a team that has legitimate playoff aspirations might just unlock the talent that we saw with him a couple of years ago. He's got 20, 25 home run pop from the left side. That'd be a great thing to have in your lineup as the 6, 7, 8 option in your order. So this could be one of those things where AJ looks at a metric that most people maybe don't look at or miss and says, well, the fact he's really good in tight situations and the fact that the White Sox play 0 tight situations and we play a lot of them, maybe that gets us the Gavin Sheets that can help us win.
Yeah, no doubt. And Kevin Acee had a piece about him. I guess Tony La Russa told Mike Schilt, this is a guy you can win with, which obviously means a lot coming from a guy like Tony La Russa, and obviously the Cardinals bond with Mike Schilt. Sheets has also talked about his approach, not just swinging for power, just trying to make good contact, spray it around the field. And the game where he had the 2 homers, including the walk-off, 3 hits of 106 plus off the bat. One of them being a single and then the 2 bombs. So making really good contact, seems to have a good approach. The Victor Rodriguez piece, he seems to kind of be there, Ruben Niebla, and the ability to kind of tap into what a guy needs to open up, unlock something for him. And hopefully that's the case for Gavin Sheets. If I'm going to hedge a little bit, this is my one concern.
It's a cactus league. Yeah.
Do you remember Jorge Alfaro going on a similar type of run in 2022, hit 4 home runs, seemed like he was homering every day. Now, while Jorge did give us some legendary moments during that 2022 season,
walk off.
Yes. LFGSD, he had 7 homers the entire season, and then they didn't hit him in the postseason.
We remember all 7 of those home runs.
And he's a legend.
One came at the best possible moment.
They brought him back, right? Last postseason. I mean, the guy's a legend till he'll never buy a beer in San Diego, nor he shouldn't buy a beer in San Diego. He's incredible, kind of a cult hero, but you are maybe looking for a little bit more consistent productivity. So hopefully it's not a situation like that, but that's what gives me a little bit pause with Gavin Sheets or anybody that's kind of going nuts this time of year.
Yeah, the catcher spot is, you got to look at that a little bit differently, just because he's not getting a whole lot of consistent at bats. Go ahead and read it.
Yeah, from 619 Cam, since you bring up the catcher spot, I think the Padres still need to get a catcher that can hit and play defense. Can't be not the answer and isn't solely out of options.
Sullivan is out of options. Yes. Elias Diaz won. He was an All-Star Game MVP 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Again, very much a defense first kind of guy. But here's the thing. They've got that guy, and it's Ethan Salas, and he's going to be there in maybe next year, maybe at worst 2 years from now. So that guy is here. He's just not here. He's in the system. He's not with San Diego. And the thing is, the JT Realmutos of the world are few and far between. Like, they are guys who were really good at the plate and behind it. They're really hard to come by. I mean, you don't have Mike Piazza's bat with Austin Hedges' glove very often. It's catcher spot is traditionally one or the other.
Yeah.
So, like Johnny Bench is a Hall of Famer. Yogi Berra is a Hall of Famer. Yadier Molina is going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, early in his career, Yadi couldn't hit a lick. He turned himself into a really good, capable, serviceable hitter that's going to put him in the Hall of Fame. So those guys are very, very hard to find. And once you do have one, you hang on to him for as long as you possibly can. But the Padres do have one. It's just it's going to take him another year or two to season and be able to get up here.
Sammy Levitt did an interview with Xander Bogaerts, worth checking out. A good chat between those two, and Sammy was asking him about some of the veteran guys and some of the turnover, Peralta and Solano, and Xander chimed in saying and Higgy, and he kind of like shook his head for a second there, like acknowledging, that's a guy that did something for us, and that's a clear void on this roster. Like, they seem to indicate that they miss that guy and they understand his contributions across the board, and seemed to be like real disappointment that he's no longer around, because he seemed to be, once he got going, I mean, you couldn't have him in a lineup like the first 2 months of the season, but then something clicked in like June and he went nuts and was a pretty consistent contributor from that point forward, on top of how he managed the staff, on top of how he controlled the running game and all that. He seems to be the best example of kind of that well-rounded catcher that they've had in a little while, through the Nolas and the Victor Caratinis, and that group that we've seen for the last 5-6 years or so. Yeah,
and he still was hitting 220, 225, something like that. It was he had a lot of really big hits, but not a whole lot of hits. Now, again, I will certainly take that. And his clubhouse presence was fantastic. I mean, he's one of those guys who every pitcher loved throwing to him. Everybody loved having him in the lineup. Again, he was your 9 hitter last year, and he finished with 19 home runs.
Yeah.
Something like that. He was great for them. Truly great for them. And he's going to be very difficult to replace. We'll see if Diaz has the same kind of thing. Before there was Gary Sanchez. Gary Sanchez, the Kraken in 2023, who came off the scrap heap from like 4 other teams, and he got here and got with Victor Martinez, and all of a sudden he turns back into Gary Sanchez again and really became good defensively, became Blake Snell's personal catcher. And you know how fickle Blake Snell is. If you can be that dude's personal catcher because he feels comfortable with you, you're doing
spiking all those pitches, spiking all the curveballs.
Yeah, he was never really renowned for him being a great defensive catcher. He was really, really good defensively that year. So I don't know. It's just something interesting about veterans who come to San Diego and get behind the plate and all of a sudden like either rekindle something or take a step up in their careers. Something happens like that. So maybe Diaz is the guy who does that this year.
Yeah, for sure. Curious what you thought about, obviously there's so many rumors about Dylan Cease. Those seemed to quiet after they got Nick Pivetta, and it's like, okay, this team's going for it in 2025, which seems to be the right approach now. Then there's been some injuries around Major League Baseball, including Garrett Cole getting Tommy John, and all of a sudden people thought, oh, well, Yankees might be looking for a top of the rotation, front of the rotation type starter, and they've got some pieces they could work with in a trade. It's funny, Brian Cashman saying, oh, we're going to start internally. There's not much out there. AJ Preller saying, oh, we want to keep the guys together. How much of that is like, this is how they really believe, or they just don't want to show their cards? And Cashman's not going to be like, oh, we need to get somebody, and then a team's going to force them to overpay because they feel like they need to. Or Preller saying, oh yeah, we're open to anything, and losing a bit of leverage. I think, I like the idea of kind of keeping the gang together and running it back. The best version of your team probably has Dylan Cease in the rotation in 2025. Obviously, 2026 and beyond is a different question. But do you think that that's as much as anything can be buttoned up with AJ Preller, as we've seen so many times, like in the weeks and days leading up to opening day and then even into the season? Or do you think that's a real thing that could still kind of be out there as opening day approaches and beyond?
I'm looking at my calendar here. Today is March 13th. We have 14 days till opening day. It was after this time last year that he got Dylan Cease. Mm-hmm. And it was a couple of years ago, he made the trade for Taylor Rogers on opening day.
On opening day, yeah.
And brought him in when Robert Suarez is going to be the setup man. That was with 2022. Then he got Luis Ariz on May 2nd, last year. AJ's got a move or two left in him. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever. What we have in camp right now is not the entire pickings of what you have to go to opening day with. So we're going to, something else is going to happen. Now, is it on the seismic level of trading Dylan Cease out of town? That I don't know. I would like to say no, because if you look around like the Yankees, for instance, they need a starting pitcher. Well, if you're going to send Dylan Cease out of town, the Padres need to get a starting pitcher of some kind back. I mean, unless they're all of a sudden willing in New York, they're in full-blown panic mode, and they're going to send Jason Dominguez and or Spencer Jones over here. If you can get one of those dudes as part of the package, okay, now maybe we're talking, because you've got Dylan Cease for one more year. But then you're talking about Stephen Kolek is turning a lot of heads right now. He did 4 more innings of 1-run ball on today against the Royals. We got a 1 ERA in his Cactus League. Kyle Hart, we still keep hearing things about, and I talked to Kyle when I was out there. It seems like he's ready to try and make that jump from the KBO to major leagues. If they've got 2 guys internally who they think can all of a sudden fill out that 5-man rotation instead of just 1, maybe they would entertain that kind of thing. But if not, you need to bring a 3rd team in, because the Yankees are not sending another starting pitcher this way, because they're trying to find starting pitchers. That makes it very difficult and very complicated, which again, AJ does complicate it really, really well. So if the Yankees go into full blown, the Orioles are also having trouble in their starting rotation. The Red Sox, we're not sure they're going to be able to put the offense together that we can still win this division. Go get Dylan Cease, because we have to. And there's a lot of pressure, as you know, in New York. And if Hal Steinbrenner suddenly says, I don't care, do it, just do it, then maybe we'll be having that conversation as things get a little bit closer. I wouldn't put it past him. I'm not predicting that's going to happen, but if it does, it'd be like, yeah, that's pretty much par for the course for AJ.
Yeah. And even going back to the discussion about the bench pieces, that now there's some flexibility there. Do they decide, things have run its course with Luis Campusano? Perhaps, one of Matt Waldron or a Randy Vasquez. Although, that goes counter to what you're just saying. You're going to need some of those arms, especially if you deal Dylan Cease. Jose Iglesias, that kind of infield mix. I don't know if it means that they would part with Jake Cronenworth, but a guy that gives you some flexibility, but, a little bit more in the bat, at least in terms of what we saw last year. And then there's kind of the financial aspect. He's making a decent amount less than Jake. So there are definitely trades to imagine 100%. Yeah. And as there always are with AJ Preller, but you don't have to think too hard to come up with some possibilities in this case, given what's on the roster.
Oh, not at all. That's a great thing about having depth, and having that depth play well as you're leading up to the season, because it shows other teams I'm going to take a flyer on this because we know what we have in house is not working, or we know this guy's going to miss the first 3 months and we have to find a way to backfill that. So let's go ahead and take a flyer on this dude. It gives you a lot of different leverages with different teams to have assets that other teams might want to get their hands on.
Yeah, for sure. You got a feel for the 5th starter spot. It seems like they want it to be Stephen Kolek, and everything that we've seen in camp seems to suggest it might be Stephen Kolek, which I can't say I expected 2 months ago.
I talked to Stephen Kolek a couple of weeks ago, actually, and it was interesting because he had this little glimmer in his eye, like, y'all about to see something. And I didn't really notice the time. I went back and watched the interview again. I went, I didn't pick up on that time, but he's smiling in a way that I didn't see him smile last year. And what's interesting is he's got a lot more diverse pitch mix than he showed as a relief pitcher.
Yeah.
Like he's got up to 5 pitches that he can throw, and we're starting to see them all now. And I remember talking to several guys who have made the jump from starter to bullpen and back to starter. Trevor Cahill being one of them. And what they learn is when you're starting pitching, you kind of like set up guys, you're pacing yourself. And sometimes that doesn't work for everybody. But then when you get into a bullpen situation, you're in attack mode right from the very beginning. So it kind of changes their mentality, and they take that back to being a starter, and they have a lot more success. Seth Lugo, another perfect example, a guy who he would just start attacking hitters. He wouldn't have to worry about setting guys up. You have to get outs immediately coming out of the bullpen. So I asked Steven if he was taking that kind of a mentality. He says, yes and no, because he realizes he wants to get guys out quicker and is not so much thinking about, 3 or 4 at bats down the road. But also he's like, when you're a reliever, I couldn't use all my pitches, so now that I'm going to have as a starter, the full arsenal that I know I can throw, it's going to be fun to set guys up, fun to think about, hey, I want to get him out now, but I want to get him out with these 3 pitches, which I would have used as a reliever anyway, and then save these 2 for the next time I face him. So he, I think, has really kind of unlocked something in himself that might make him really, really good as a starter, maybe even better as a reliever, because he's able to take the 2 things, the arsenal of the starter and the mentality of a reliever, and really make it work for him. I'm really intrigued by what might be happening there.
Is there disappointment that like you get Michael King, and Michael King's been awesome, but I think part of the allure of the Juan Soto trade was like the potential of Randy Vasquez, which he showed at points last year, and Johnny Brito. And, wouldn't you rather see Randy Vasquez like really take hold, like I'm the guy this spring, or Johnny Brito kind of take a step? It makes me wonder a little bit with those guys, and what does their trajectory look like going forward now, having a year plus in the system.
Well, you'd like to see it, yeah. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Yeah. It would be great. It'd be great if Randy Vasquez came out and was, locking down everybody and striking out 2 an inning. But if that's not the case, then you know what he is? He's a very reliable bullpen arm. And but he's also, he gives you that depth in your system that you have to have. Because as you know, 5 guys are not making all 162 starts in the modern game in Major League Baseball. You have to have those guys. And that's what Vasquez was really good at last year, coming up from AAA, making some spot starts, filling in for a week or 2 or 3. And then somebody comes back, Yu Darvish comes back, and the Padres are better off because of it. That you're going to have those kinds of guys. And if Randy Vasquez turns into being one of those kinds of guys, now I think it's still a really good thing to have. If Johnny Brito is one of those guys, it's a really good thing to have, because you did get that ace caliber guy in Michael King. So as of right now, just like Michael said in the playoffs last year, the Padres did win the Juan Soto trade. Even regardless of what happens now, they've won the Juan Soto trade.
Yeah, I agree. 619 Cam again with Hoeing and Reynolds hurt. Do you think the Padres could still trade Suarez? Who, I mean,
not with him having a 19 ERA right now. No. No. Could they? Sure. Because who were the 2 guys you mentioned?
Hoeing and Reynolds.
Hoeing and Reynolds. Yes. Those guys should be able to come. Hoeing with the shoulder maybe is a little more concerning, because shoulders are cranky in pitchers, and that tends to lead a little bit of concern. A stress reaction at foot, you just stay off of it for a while and you're going to be okay. But remember, the Padres, they have a lot of depth in that bullpen. Estrada, I think, has shown that he does have closer caliber stuff. Jason Adam, we know, has closer caliber stuff. So could they trade Suarez? Sure. Are they apt to do that right now? I don't think so. But yeah, again, with AJ, you just don't know. You just don't know if somebody comes in and they're like, we are a closer away from winning our division, and that division is the American League Central, and they want to throw something at you to bring Suarez over. He will certainly entertain that. So are they shopping him? No. Would they listen on him? No question.
Yeah. And, Robert Suarez, ERA, he didn't have a great spring last year either. Wasn't quite a 19 ERA like he's sporting right now, but he wasn't super sharp or lights out last year. And then you remember how he started the season, was pretty darn reliable.
He was incredible, right? Listen, just throw the fastball, throw the sinker, tinker around with the change in the slider or whatever you want to do. But as long as, I think in spring training, he's still finding the feel for a couple of his secondary pitches. When the lights come on opening day, he'll be just fine.
Yeah, you'll see plenty of that four-seamer. Before we go, Aztecs about to tip here. John Seidler is officially the chairman of the San Diego Padres.
He
Wednesday
is.
was his first day, got through that 30-day period. He's a trustee of the Peter Seidler Trust. He is the control person. He did a interview with Kevin Acee, and he should be having a more formal media scrum at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future. Not sure when that's going to be just yet. But any thoughts now? I mean, we knew this was coming, but now that it's here, and we've maybe heard a little bit more about the guy. It says he wants to kind of continue on the same path and trajectory, but time will tell.
Yeah, it's well, he said what he's supposed to say, aside from the, can't say beat LA thing, which was, what? I know a lot of people don't like that. And eventually you have to move on, but I give him credit for being like, listen, man.
Yeah. I
I
appreciate the honesty.
Like, this is my youth, man. It's hard. He sees himself as an 8-year-old kid holding up a banner at a game. Like, that's hard to let go of,
Yeah.
So credit to him for showing some vulnerability there and saying, hey man, this is what happened. But again, he said mostly all the right things. Now we have to see if he follows those up with the proper actions. So far, I'll say so far, so good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the quotes were a whole lot of nothing. I mean, you could maybe nitpick a little bit, but he was kind of telling his story. And if you read all the way through, he's talked about how, like, look, he's all in now. He's got no issues saying beat LA. Like, he got that out of, and also this is 2012. We're going back 13 years. I just, I don't put too much in that. And at the end of the day, like, what ultimately matters is how he runs the organization. And he seems pretty determined, at least based on what he said, to, bring this city a championship and do what, Peter intended to do as owner of the San Diego Padres. And so I don't know. I'm willing. I appreciate the honesty, because like you could very easily maybe craft an answer that skates around like the Dodgers stuff, but I appreciate somebody who's just going to tell you like it is and give you their genuine experience and all that. And he seemed to do that, as a guy that, from what we understand, seems to be pretty private. So it'll be interesting to see, how he steps into that role and navigates that role, given how he seems to be more of or prefers to be a behind the scenes type of guy. But I like how authentic he seemed to be in that interview. And I don't think that's going to have how he felt about the Dodgers in 2010 or 2005. I don't think it's going to have any bearing on how he runs the Padres now in 2025 going forward.
Or we're reading it very wrong, and that's an indicator that he has absolutely no idea what to say in a public setting. I'm hoping that's not the case, but I'm just saying they got to throw it out there because it is a possibility. Some people just don't know how to read the room. I was just watching Deadpool and Wolverine again. Keyword again. And there's a scene where, Elektra and Blade and Gambit, they're like, yeah, we're going to go get him. We're going in the lair. We're going to take him. And then Wolverine says, you're all going to die. And Deadpool turns and says, read the room. It's one of those type of situations. And hopefully John is not in that kind of a vein where he just doesn't know how to read a room.
Maybe I'm being naive, and we'll circle back to this episode and this conversation if there are repeated foot in mouth situations. But
now again, I don't think I'm giving that a 10% chance that that's the case.
Yeah.
But again, it is a 10% that you do have to take into consideration.
Certainly. So look forward to, the scrum whenever that comes around. Do you have a question for him, top of mind? If you had one question to throw John Seidler's way?
Oh, do I get the very first question?
You can get whatever question you want.
Oh God, it'd be payroll based. It would be, you want to continue to carry on with Peter's vision. Does that mean we're going to see $285 million payrolls? Is that, do you think that is sustainable? Do you think that's something that San Diego can do multiple times? Are you willing to go out and grab a guy like a Juan Soto and at the trade deadline, if that means you're going to have to pay him $30 million the next year? I would want to know exactly where he stands on going over the CBT and how far and often he's willing to do it.
Yeah, I think fans would too. Aztecs trailing 6-5, 16.5. Opening half of Mountain West quarterfinals.
That's it. NIT. We're going to the
NIT. Good being back with you, Derek, and look forward to doing this again next week when we will be 7 days from opening day.
And you
Ready
as
for that.
well. And that is going to be, that'll be when the rubber hits the road.
Can't wait. See you then.